The law of gravitation is said by the advocates of the Newtonian system of astronomy to be the greatest discovery of science and the foundation of the whole of modern astronomy. If, therefore, it can be shown that gravitation is a pure assumption and an imagination of the mind only, that it has no existence outside of the brains of its expounders and advocates, the whole of the hypotheses of this modern so-called science fall to the ground as flat as the surface of the ocean. And this, most exact of all sciences, this wonderful feat of the intellect, becomes at once the most ridiculous superstition and the most gigantic imposture to which ignorance and credulity could ever be exposed. Thomas Winship, Zetetic Cosmogony.
Today we're going to talk about gravity. What is it? Where does it come from? Concerning gravity, if I get any response, any sort of rebuttal to anything that I say concerning the flat earth model in any of my videos, Facebook posts, tweets, or anything from Instagram, the single word that is used the most is gravity. I'd suggest a sort of drinking game, like if you go down the comment section in any of my videos or tweets or whatever, every time somebody uses the word gravity, you have to take a shot. I would suggest that, but I don't want to be held responsible for anybody getting alcohol poisoning, so at your own discretion, people. Just an idea. Just putting that out there. Alright, so what we've been told about gravity is that when an object becomes so massive that it creates its own gravitational pull. Now, when people come to me, they say that I don't understand gravity, how it works. I don't understand science. I don't understand physics. But they're suggesting that they understand science so much, yet they don't seem to adhere to the scientific method. Now, one of the most important steps in the scientific method is test through an experiment. You want to be able to experiment whatever you come up with as far as a scientific conclusion. Before you go off preaching something as fact, you need to be able to test it. Now, if I understand correctly, as far as an object creating so much mass that it creates its own gravitational pull, that cannot be tested in a lab. That can't be duplicated. Therefore, the whole mass creating its own gravitational pull, that falls under the category of pseudoscience, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, another thing that we're told about gravity is that the old justification, and there are still adults walking around saying, if it weren't for gravity, we'd all go flying off into space.
You wind up in the place you started from. Yes, Thomas.
Why don't we fall off when we walk underneath, Miss Sarah?
Because of a force called gravity.
What does gravity look like?
Gravity is something we can't see, but we know it's a great invisible force that keeps us all here on Earth. It's a natural force that keeps us all from flying off into space.
We were always told that the world is flat.
You are told right, don't listen to her.
Seriously, people believe this. And if you sit down and think about it for just a couple of minutes, you'll realize it's one of the most ridiculous things that you can say. Now, another thing that gravity is supposedly responsible for here on Earth is holding vast amounts of water to the bottom of a spinning ball. Once again, gravity is supposedly responsible for holding trillions of pounds of water to the bottom of a spinning ball. People walk around believing this. They don't really give it a whole lot of thought, but you and I both know what happens when a ball is spun that has water on it or attached to it. And I'd have to ask a question. How is it that gravity is so strong that it can hold trillions of pounds of water to the underside of a ball, yet it's so weak that it can't pull a butterfly downward? Okay, because we're told that gravity from all points on the planet's surface is pulling everything towards the center, including water, and this causes water to curve. Although, again, with the scientific method and experimentation, I don't believe that anyone's actually had the time or the resources to link me to the video wherein they caused the oceans to bend into a sphere. That's never happened. I don't believe it's ever happened. And if someone can prove to me that there was an experiment conducted where the oceans were curved into a ball, please link it to me so I can check it out. And the funny thing is that people pretend to understand gravity so much, when in actuality, one of their trusted gurus, old Neil Snake in the Grass Tyson, when asked in an interview on the radio, what is gravity? The first words out of his mouth were, I have no idea, next question. Because he doesn't really know what gravity is. He went on to explain what he thought was the effects of gravity, a few other aspects of gravity, and he said something about it's described as the curvature of space-time, whatever the heck that means. But this guy's an astrophysicist. Now, astrophysics, let's look into what that means exactly. Astrophysics is the branch of astronomy concerned with the physical nature of stars and other celestial bodies and the application of the laws and theories of physics to the interpretation of astronomical observations. Theories. He's somewhat of a theoretical physicist, okay? Because once again, they can't really test, replicate, experiment on what goes on out in space. Once you hop in a rocket and you go out beyond the atmosphere, okay, you go out into space, everything just turns into magic. Light doesn't work the same, time doesn't work the same, there's gravity to justify all this other stuff, but none of it can be placed in the realm of absolute scientific fact because it cannot be experimented upon. Do you get that? Tell me you get that. Okay, also this goofball went on to some show and he drops a microphone as if that proves gravity. Well, we'll get to that later. Now, Newton came up with this idea after an apple fell on his head. He's sitting next to a tree. Apple falls on his head, and this guy gets a brilliant idea, says, we're just going to say that there's this force pulling everything downward, not really accounting for the leaves that were still on the tree, but we'll move on from there. Now, personally, I wish that someone would have been around to explain buoyancy and molecular density to this guy. Okay, buoyancy, the medium through which objects rise and fall through water. Density, the medium through which objects rise and fall through the air. Okay, if you take your phone and you accidentally drop that phone in water, because the phone is more dense on a molecular level, that phone drops to the floor of that body of water, whether it's a pool, lake, whatever. But also with that phone, on the inside, there are going to be bubbles inside that phone. Those oxygen bubbles are going to come from the phone. They're going to release themselves, and they're going to float back up through the surface to the surface of the water, because oxygen is less dense than the water that surrounds it. Okay, that's buoyancy right there. Okay, now the same thing works as far as density. Now, out in the air, I pull my keys out and I drop my keys. My keys are more dense than the oxygen that surrounds my keys, so the keys drop. All right, that's how that works. This balloon here, because it's got helium inside it, helium on a molecular level is less dense than oxygen. So when the balloon is released, the oxygen surrounding it is more dense, the helium is less dense, so the balloon floats. Is it defying gravity? I don't think anyone's ever actually looked at a helium balloon and said, oh my god, that balloon's defying gravity. Doesn't happen, because it wouldn't make any sense for someone to say such a thing. You know, the way that this goes, it's like, look at a hot air balloon, okay? Hot air balloon. The fire goes into the balloon. Now the balloon works as a barrier from the outside. The oxygen on the outside of the balloon becomes different from the oxygen on the inside of the hot air balloon, because the fire goes inside the balloon, superheats up the oxygen on the inside, causes those oxygen molecules to expand to a point to where they are less dense than the oxygen on the outside of the balloon, and that causes that hot air balloon to float. That's how that works. So again, you've never looked at a hot air balloon and said, oh my god, that balloon is defying gravity. Nobody says that, because deep down we all know that's not what it is. Okay? You're saying that a 30-pound weight isn't a 30-pound weight without gravity? That doesn't make any sense. Another thing that people like to point to is that experiment, supposedly, in a vacuum, where the guy got up to a high point in this lab, drops a feather and a bowling ball. And it would seem that the feather and the bowling ball hit the bottom at the same time. And people will use that as justification to say, yep, gravity, boom, there it is. But let me ask you a question. What percentage of the Earth's surface is a vacuum? Nice round number.
Remember earlier when I said I'd get back around to addressing Neil and his famous mic drop to prove gravity? I need you to pay especially close attention to this part, because it took me like an hour and a half to find his feather.
And by the way, this is called gravity.
No, Neil, that's called density. So in conclusion, what is gravity? Gravity is the primary tool used to explain away everything that can't be determined with common sense and logic in the heliocentric model. It's all smoke and mirrors. Gravity is a myth. Gravity is the glue that holds this whole lie together. Gravity? It's all in your head. And that's all I got for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to hit the bell in order to get notifications when I upload new videos. Be sure to link up with myself and the crew at The Future of Flat Earth and or Flat Life on Facebook. And as always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, and stay flat. I'll see you in the next video.